This week we will learn how to paint this evening cityscape using watercolors. Welcome to my home studio where I share my passion for watercolor paintings. My name is Dinesh. Today we will learn how to paint an evening cityscape in watercolors. I will show you how to create washes for warm skies, build up the structures and add cool shadows in the foreground to craft a scene bathed in the soft glow of dusk. Before we dive in, be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our ever-growing creative community. Now without further ado, let's get started everyone. When you approach a subject like this, which is kind of a little bit complex, we have to simplify and we have to plan our painting. So we have to think everything in midground, foreground and the background. So the foreground are the person on the road, the midground are the cars and the buildings, and the background are the CN Tower, the old cityscape. And that's how I simplified it. As for the supply goes, I'm using Bowan watercolor paper, 300 GSM, a rough surface, 9 by 12 inches. For the paints, I'm using Winsor Newton professional grade watercolor paints, and you can use any paints you want, but make sure to use a good watercolor paper. And I usually start with a light sketch, and I usually start with assigning where my persons are. So that way I know that from that I can constantly compare the other things which I'm going to plan my painting. And this also helps to sketch as well, and this is also called point-to-point sketching, comparing constantly with other objects around your composition and your reference. And you can see that I'm making sure the foreground elements read really nice, and I'm going to keep the rest of the elements really weak. And I usually don't use eraser that much. For this painting I did because I want to have a really good sketch, because I want to make sure to capture this evening glow as accurate as possible and the proportions as close as possible to my reference. You can see that there's a lot of noise happening, and that's why it is really necessary to add a sketch in our watercolor paint. So first thing first, I'm going to put down a wash of that evening glow, this lightish tints, the tints which are reflecting on the cityscape. So I just add that first, and I'm using cobalt blue for the sky, and I'm just making sure to bring it all the way down. And again, I'm just going to use tissue paper where I put the glints, and I'm also warming up the wash at the bottom using a little bit of this reddish color at the bottom. And as it comes to the foreground and the midground, I'm using a lightish gray using neutral tint. At the bottom, I'm going to use a little bit of alizarin crimson, and just to see a little bit of warmth in my wash. When you do it, again, I don't worry about the colors that much. I usually think about cool and warm colors. When I see a warm color, I put a warm color. When I see a cool color, I put a cool color. Even though the washes look darker now, because we are comparing the washes everything to the white paper, so that's why it looks darker. But once we apply the wash on everything else, it gets duller. So I'm painting the road, and I'm trying to leave some white bits for the street signs, the street walk, but I want to make sure it kind of looks blurry because I want to make sure it's instantly in the shadows. And there's this two figures which is the foreground. I was lucky enough that they were standing for the lights, and because this also gives a really nice scale and a really good element for a painting. So in any painting I do, I try to add figures because it shows the scale of the painting, as well as it kind of gives that human element in our reference as well. So now I'm focusing on the midground building. Again, in watercolors, there's one thing that happens is even though it looks vibrant now, it goes dull. It goes dull, and it loses the vibrancy because so the wash goes dull. So we have to compensate our layering, make sure that we are doing a little bit darker. Again, that's not end up be all, because sometimes what happens is I'll go and glaze over to get the exact consistency and just to get the exact value. So I'm really keen on value. When I talk about value is something which is light and dark. I usually keep the values which are lighter in the background. As it comes to the foreground, I usually make it vibrant. I also make it darker. So this is another way of enhancing depth other than perspective as well. So now I'm doing the washes, the warm washes for the background. And when I'm doing it, I'm always thinking that how can I simplify the shape, and is there a way I can change everything in my painting. I always think about that. When I'm able to change it, I usually go and change it. And again, now I'm doing the midground. So the midground, I noticed that uh, it's kind of like there's a car. It's a white car. So I want to make sure to capture that. So I left some white bits for that. And this is another thing I don't like about. It's not that I don't like about watercolors, because when I paint, I want to paint freely. I don't like cutting around and painting the positive and negative shapes. I want to paint freely, and you can see that even though the colors when we put in the beginning look darker, now it got dull once we applied the colors on other areas in our washes. So I also increased the consistency in the foreground again, and now I'm adding the car. So again, I'm going to think about the white car as a base color, and there's also this station. I also want to capture that as well, and this also brings everything as a midground element, and this also helps us to push the background all the way at the back. And now I'm trying to add those like this dried out leaves which is at the bottom, and I really wanted to add this darker pole in the midground, because again, I was thinking to bring something forward, and this is a way to do it. Having a darker value and having a lighter value on the background, which pushes everything. You can see that I was layering everything really slow, and I'm going to build up my values. Again, even for this street poles, the poles are darker when I squint my eyes. When I see the reference, it looks darker. But I want to start with the lightest value, and I want to slowly build up the values behind it. And there's also this banner, this purple banner. I'm adding that as well. I should have ignored it, but vanity prevents it. Sometimes I get into the habit of adding each and every details just to enhance the realism or to push the capabilities of watercolors. And now I'm adding the background part, and even though these guys are in shadows, I'm trying to introduce a lot of cool shadows in the background. So there's another thing. I also use this technique of using warm versus cool. Whenever there's a warm color, I try to introduce a cool shadow. Even if there's a cool building, I try to introduce a warmer shadow. It's kind of like complementing at each other, and that also gives a really nice color visually pleasing in our painting. I don't know, it works, and I have used it quite a lot in my painting. And if you want to try it, and try it in your own painting as well, and that gives a really nice foil to or element to the painting as well. And again, I'm trying to simplify the shadows at the background. Even the CN tower looks a little bit darker, even though it's in light, and there's a lot of things happening there as well. And you can see that as soon as I added the shadows, the cityscape already looking three-dimensional. So there's another thing I also when you guys painting anything, and especially painting sunset or painting anything in watercolors, is just to see if our shape is looking 3D. And that's one thing I keep in mind while I paint. If it doesn't look 3D, I'll try to go and apply what I see in my reference and what makes it 3D, and I'll do that. And you can see that just by doing it, it really nicely added those light and shadow in the background. So now I'm going to be focusing on the street lights, and there's a lot of street lights. I could have skipped some, but again, I want to enhance the detail, so I went ahead and added everything in my reference. And you can also see I also added this. Again, I was talking about warm versus cool. The sky is really cool, and we are adding a warmish tone on top of it. And again, that gives a really nice visually pleasing in a painting as well. And other thing is unity. So when you see a color, when you apply on a lot of areas, it also creates this unity in a painting as well. And now I'm adding this darker building which is in the shadow. And again, you can see that I'm using kind of like a cool color, but it's a little bit coolish gray, and that all gives a really nice element as well. And now I'm focusing on the shadows for the midground building. So the midground building, I won't be adding that much details. You can see that this is what I was mentioning in the beginning of the tutorial, is like the washers go dull. Even though the washers I kept really vibrant, it looked vibrant, but you can see that how dull it went right now. And even though it's dull, even if it's going dull, I usually go and glaze over it and to get the vibrancy back. And I'm just adding the shadows for the building which is there, and I'm also focusing on the sign, and I'm also trying to add the shadow which is peeking through behind the sign as well. And I'll just keep building it up, and at the bottom I'm also trying to create a gradient. So any shape I paint, I also try to have this gradient, and this also anchors that building on the ground. You can see that as soon as we anchored that gradient, it looks like the building is anchored on the ground by itself. And now I'm adding the door, and I'm kind of like creating those things. Now I'll be focusing on the street pole. It kind of looks really rusty. I don't know if you guys can see in the reference. The first layer I kind of use this bluish gray because there's a little bit of the metal which is peeking through behind the rust. And now I'm adding the rust using a dry brush. And I want to make sure to get as dark as possible because it is darker, and I also want this to come foreground. And you can see that as soon as I added that, magically it just comes to the foreground, and which is on the other side. And there's this other street pole. This is kind of like in a bluish gray, so I'm going to add that as well. I should have skipped this, but again, I want to capture each and every details, because if I were to remove this street pole, it would be really nice because it would have showed the banner a little bit better. And again, I also think everything in terms of 3. So if there is only 2 street poles, I try to add the third one, because 3 is odd number, which is also looks really nice as a designing element. So I just want to add 3 as well. And the same concept I also applied for the street lights as well. I added 3 street lights, and you can see that I'm also doing the exact same thing for the rust element in the foreground as well. And I'm going to make this a little bit even darker compared to the street pole, which is sitting on the other side of the street, and which is kind of like a midground. And in the foreground, I'm making it darker so it comes forward to us. And you can see that I layered it in such a way that it's lighter at the background. In the midground, it's a little bit lighter, and in the foreground, it's a little bit darker. So I'm trying to align my values in such a way that which kind of creates a depth. And I always try to create depth in my painting because that's our way of enhancing perspective as well. And you can also see that I also spend more time on the foreground in the rest of the element because I want to make sure that it looks as realistic as possible. And now I'm adding the details for the street signs, the street lights, and which is kind of attached to the street poles. So I want to make sure to get that attachment right. And you can also see that I'm also adding that street sign which is attaching on the other side of the pole as well, and that's why it looks a little bit smaller. And this is another street light to show the timing to go on the other side, and it's going to be a little bit dark, as well as there's going to be a little bit of darker values. And you can see that the light hitting on the pole, and there's a little bit of a softer gradient happening from top to bottom. I'm trying to capture that shape because that enhances the lighting. It also shows like where the light hit the where the sunlight is hitting on the cityscape as well as the midground. So these are the darker values in the midground. You can literally see it when you squint your eyes, and for this I'm using a lot of warmer grays for it. So for warmer grays, I usually use earth tones. When I talk about earth tones, I'm talking about amber, burnt amber, or burnt sienna, or any kind of mix with a little bit of blue in it. So now I'm adding the car and for the car, and now I'm focusing on the figure. So I spent so much time on other elements, I left the figure by itself. So I'm trying to capture the figure now. So when I paint the figures, I think about what is the easiest way I can manage to get the shape. That's how I think about. I don't think about I'm painting a figure or a human being. I think about like painting a shape, because that helps me to think in my mind that I can easily simplify it, and that's what I'm trying to. And it was a little bit chilly on this day, and that's why they were wearing coats. And I really like this person was wearing an orange coat, because that gives a really nice color element to our painting as well, because again it's kind of like a combination of warm and cools there, because there's a lot of cooler tone from the mid-tone to the background. So this kind of like this warmish tone also break the monotonous in our painting as well. And I'm trying to add some details in the figure, and I'm trying to capture the jacket. Again, I did spend a lot of time on this figure, trying to push the realism on this painting as well. And for the car, which is on the mid-crown, again, now I'm thinking that I should have left it as it is. I don't know why I added it, because that would have kept this figure really nice. But sometimes when you paint, you don't think about it, you just want to paint, and that's what I was doing. And this thing, I wait till the end. So what I mean by that is this street wires. So these are the tertiary details. So when we did this sunset, you can see that I was focusing on the biggest washes first, then I was slowly layering the shadows from the background to the midground, so I know where the values are. And this is kind of like this street wires, and like, because we can't able to go inside this space because they add this gate there, so I want to add that as well. And I did add these details on top of it. So now I'm thinking about adding a 3D shape or 3-dimensional to the street lights. I'm trying to get those details back from it. So again, I'm going to be spending a little bit of time on this one because in my earlier work, I didn't do that much details on my the street lights. But nowadays I'm spending some time because I'm learning how does it look, what shape is it, because when I paint for a long time I'll remember it. So now I'm adding the eyelets to bring back some of the eyelets which I couldn't able to bring it, especially the sign which is in the midground, and I'm trying to get the glints in the cityscape as well. And again, I want to keep it like really minimal. This is just to bring back certain details from it, and it's better not to overdo it and keep it really simple. And this is how the painting looks like at the end. And there are certain things I went and changed and glazed over it to get the vibrancy back. Now it's your turn. Pick one of your sunset reference or use my own reference, and try to capture the essence of the scene and try to apply the things I have showed in this video. And you can come up with your own technique as well at the end. Thank you once again for watching this painting tutorial. Please feel free to share your thoughts on the video in the comment section below. If you have any other watercolor related topics you'd like me to cover, reach out to me at watercolorimpressions@gmail.com or leave a comment down below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and be sure to hit the subscribe button to become a part of our learning community. By subscribing, you will receive weekly upload notifications and stay updated on our channel and share with your fellow artists, friends and family. And good luck with your painting, folks.